What should have been the happiest day of their lives became a nightmare of twisted metal, collapsing structures, and split-second tragedies that turned celebration into catastrophe. These stories reveal how quickly joy can transform into horror when safety meets circumstance in the most unforgiving ways imaginable. It was October 20th, 2016, at a suburban banquet hall in Des Moines, Iowa, where a wedding reception was underway during the evening hours. Casper Flynn, 29, had just married his longtime girlfriend in a ceremony attended by 150 guests. The warehouse supervisor was known among friends and family for his competitive nature and athletic build. He rarely backed down from challenges and threw himself wholeheartedly into group activities, traits that made him popular at work and social gatherings. The reception had been underway for several hours. Alcohol flowed freely as guests celebrated the newlyweds. Around 9:30 p.m., the wedding party organized a traditional game where participants passed wrapped food items mouth to mouth in a circle. The chosen item was a dense bread roll measuring approximately 4 inches wide. Casper positioned himself at the center of the circle as guests formed a tight ring around him. The crowd cheered enthusiastically, creating an energetic but chaotic atmosphere. No one had been designated to supervise the activity or establish safety protocols. As the game progressed, Casper leaned forward repeatedly, eager to speed up the passing. The competitive spirit that defined his personality drove him to push the pace. Guests pressed closer, their excitement building with each successful pass. The circle tightened as more people joined, creating additional pressure. The bread roll entered Casper's mouth at an awkward angle. Laughter and jostling from surrounding guests caused his jaw to snap shut suddenly. The dense roll lodged deep in his throat, blocking his airway completely. Casper was unable to cough or draw in air. Casper attempted to cough but could not expel the obstruction. He staggered backward, bumping into nearby guests who initially thought his movements were part of the game's theatrics. The crowd continued cheering, mistaking his distress for playful performance. His face began showing signs of panic. Within moments, Casper collapsed onto the banquet hall floor. His skin began changing color as oxygen deprivation set in. Several guests attempted to help by slapping his back, but these efforts failed to dislodge the obstruction. No one present knew how to perform the Heimlich maneuver correctly. The realization that something was seriously wrong spread through the crowd. Someone called 911 while others tried various ineffective rescue attempts. The festive atmosphere transformed into panic as guests watched helplessly. Wedding staff attempted crowd control while maintaining space for medical intervention. Emergency responders arrived within 8 minutes of the initial call. Paramedics immediately began advanced airway management procedures. They successfully removed the bread roll obstruction, but the intervention came too late. Casper had been without oxygen for too long. Despite aggressive resuscitation efforts, Casper Flynn was pronounced dead at the scene. The cause of death was determined to be asphyxia caused by complete airway obstruction. The reception ended immediately as guests were questioned by authorities. Several attendees had captured portions of the incident on their phones, providing investigators with a clear timeline of events. The footage showed the game's progression and the delayed recognition of Casper's distress. The county coroner's office ruled the death accidental. Their report noted that alcohol consumption may have impaired both Casper's reflexes and the crowd's ability to recognize the emergency quickly. No criminal charges were filed, though the incident prompted discussions about safety protocols at wedding venues. The banquet hall subsequently implemented policies requiring trained staff supervision during all reception games and activities. It was September 15, 2015, when a lakeside wedding in northern Georgia would end in tragedy for one family member. Otis Graham, a 52-year-old automotive technician, had driven 3 hours to attend his nephew's outdoor ceremony. He was known among relatives for his steady temperament rather than urgency. After decades spent around engines, compressors, and fuel systems, Otis believed most mechanical setups were predictable if left alone. He rarely intervened unless directly asked, trusting routine equipment to behave as it always had. The wedding venue stretched along a private lake, with wooden docks extending into the calm water. String lights powered by a portable generator created an intimate atmosphere as evening approached. The generator, a standard 3,500-watt unit, had been running continuously for several hours to illuminate the ceremony space and power the sound system. Its steady hum blended into the background noise of conversation and music. As guests mingled during the cocktail hour, the generator began running low on fuel. A venue worker refilled the tank while the unit was still hot from operation, assuming the open lakeside environment provided sufficient ventilation. Gasoline vapors, however, drifted downward and accumulated beneath the dock's enclosed access ramp. Wooden boards formed a partially sealed cavity, approximately 4 feet high and 8 feet wide, limiting airflow and trapping fumes close to the structure. Otis remained near the edge of the dock, leaning casually against the railing while watching the water reflect the string lights. He was not observing the generator or the refueling process, nor did anything about the moment feel unusual. The setting appeared calm and familiar, similar to countless outdoor gatherings he had attended over the years. Beneath him, the enclosed space had become saturated with invisible gasoline vapors, creating conditions similar to an unventilated service bay. When the generator was restarted, a normal internal ignition spark occurred during startup. The spark ignited the trapped fuel-air mixture, producing a rapid deflagration. The confined space amplified the pressure wave, forcing it upward and violently flexing multiple sections of the dock in a single instant. The blast lifted Otis off his feet and threw him backward approximately 6 feet. His chest struck a fixed wooden support beam with immense force. The sudden deceleration ruptured his thoracic aorta, causing catastrophic internal bleeding within seconds. A brief burst of flame followed near the generator before dissipating over the open water, leaving only smoke and splintered wood. Emergency responders arrived within 12 minutes but found no signs of life. Otis was pronounced dead at the scene from blunt thoracic trauma. The state fire marshal's investigation concluded that improper refueling procedures and inadequate ventilation beneath the dock created the explosive conditions. The generator manufacturer's guidelines explicitly warned against refueling hot engines in enclosed or semi-enclosed spaces. Security footage captured the ignition sequence, confirming the timing and cause of the explosion. Investigators also cited the venue's lack of formal safety protocols for fuel-powered equipment during events. The dock was permanently closed following the investigation. New safety regulations were implemented at the venue, and county fire officials began inspecting similar lakeside facilities to prevent comparable incidents in the future. It was April 15, 2018, when a historic hotel wedding in Savannah, Georgia, turned deadly for 27-year-old Lyra Kent. Lyra worked in retail management and was known among friends for her adventurous spirit and tendency to climb onto elevated surfaces for better photo angles. She had arrived at the wedding as a bridesmaid, carrying her phone to document the evening's festivities. The reception was held at a restored 19th-century hotel, where guests mingled on the ground floor, while a wrought iron balcony on the second floor provided an elevated view of the celebration below. The ornate railing, original to the building, showed signs of age with rust visible at several anchor points where the metal met the brick facade. The balcony railings had been deemed historically significant and left largely untouched during renovations. During the reception, Lyra noticed the balcony offered an ideal vantage point to film the dancing guests below. Several attendees had already commented on how the railing felt loose when they leaned against it, but the observation went unreported to venue staff. Lyra climbed onto the lower horizontal rail of the balcony, gripping the vertical posts for balance while positioning her phone to record. The additional weight and lateral pressure caused the corroded anchor bolts to fail at the railing's eastern end. Witnesses later reported hearing a distinct creaking sound moments before the collapse. As the railing detached, one of the vertical iron posts rotated inward. Lyra's forward momentum carried her into an exposed, rusted anchor bolt that had torn free from the brickwork, driving into her lower abdomen as the railing shifted. The penetration caused catastrophic internal injuries, including laceration of abdominal organs and major mesenteric blood vessels, leading to rapid, uncontrolled internal hemorrhaging. She remained briefly pinned against the failed railing, before losing strength and collapsing onto the balcony floor. Blood loss was rapid and extensive. Guests on the ground floor initially thought someone had spilled red wine until they looked up and saw the damaged railing. Hotel staff called emergency services within minutes of the incident. Paramedics arrived and attempted to stabilize her condition, but the internal hemorrhaging could not be controlled at the scene. The narrow staircase leading to the balcony complicated rescue efforts. Lyra was pronounced dead from her injuries before transport to a medical facility could be arranged. The reception ended immediately, and guests were asked to leave the premises while investigators secured the scene. The state's Occupational Safety and Health Agency conducted an investigation into the structural failure. Their report concluded that the wrought iron railing had deteriorated beyond safe operational limits, with anchor bolts showing significant corrosion. The hotel had not conducted structural inspections of the balcony in over 8 years. The hotel was cited for failing to maintain proper safety inspections of elevated structures accessible to guests. The balcony was permanently sealed following the incident, and the venue implemented new safety protocols. Security footage from the hotel's interior cameras captured the moments leading up to the railing failure, though the actual collapse occurred outside the camera's field of view. Several guests had recorded video of the reception, but none had been filming the balcony at the time. Lyra's phone was recovered from the balcony floor, its screen cracked, but still functional. The official cause of death was listed as penetrating abdominal trauma, resulting in catastrophic internal hemorrhage from damage to abdominal organs and mesenteric blood vessels. It was November 12, 2016, when a community hall wedding in Dayton, Ohio, became the scene of a fatal accident that would expose the risks of improvised event staging. Gideon Ross, a 41-year-old construction foreman, had driven 3 hours to attend his cousin's wedding reception. In his professional life, Gideon was accustomed to being the person others deferred to when something appeared unsafe. He believed hesitation created risk, and that visible problems should be corrected immediately before they escalated into something worse. The community hall had been decorated with fabric draping and string lights. A 3-tier wedding cake rested on a folding table positioned near the edge of a low wooden stage that extended roughly 18 inches above the main floor. The stage, built years earlier for small musical performances, had never been engineered for sustained foot traffic or shifting point loads, and its age showed in subtle warping along the boards. As the reception progressed, guests dancing near the stage caused vibrations through the floor. The cake table drifted incrementally closer to the edge, nudged by passing guests and the movement of bodies nearby. Several people noticed and commented quietly among themselves, exchanging uneasy glances, but no staff member intervened, assuming the table would remain stable long enough for the event to conclude. When the table's position was mentioned again, Gideon reacted without hesitation. He stated firmly that it needed to be moved before someone got hurt. Without waiting for venue staff or assistance, he walked toward the stage. Conversations nearby slowed and several guests turned to watch him, creating a brief pause where stepping back would have felt unnecessary and even irresponsible. Gideon stepped onto the stage. The platform flexed beneath his weight, more noticeably than expected. The wooden structure, built with lightweight framing and minimal cross-bracing, strained under the sudden load. A dull creak echoed across the hall, followed by the sharp crack of failing boards that cut through the music. The surface gave way instantly. Gideon fell chest first off the stage, landing directly onto a stack of metal folding chairs stored beneath. The chair frames collapsed inward, driving fractured ribs into his chest and puncturing both lungs. The impact expelled the air from his body, leaving him unable to draw breath as he struck the floor. Guests rushed toward him as he struggled, gasping and clutching at his chest. Air and blood rapidly filled his chest cavity, causing bilateral tension pneumothorax. A nurse attending the reception attempted CPR, while others cleared space, shouted for help, and called emergency services. Panic spread through the room as the music stopped and guests were ushered away. Emergency responders arrived approximately 12 minutes after the initial call. Paramedics found Gideon unresponsive, with severe chest trauma and no effective respiration. He was pronounced dead at the scene as guests stood outside in silence, many still in formal attire. The county building inspector's investigation later determined that the stage had not been designed for foot traffic. The structure lacked proper load calculations, adequate cross-bracing, and structural fasteners. Cell phone footage confirmed the collapse occurred seconds after Gideon stepped onto the platform. The official cause of death was traumatic chest injuries, including multiple rib fractures and bilateral lung collapse. The hall's insurance provider later settled with Gideon's family. The incident prompted local authorities to reassess safety standards for aging and temporary event structures, particularly those repurposed for large gatherings. It was August 12, 2017, in Palm Springs, California. As dusk settled over a private garden venue surrounded by desert landscaping, guests gathered for an outdoor wedding reception planned to continue into the evening hours. String lights illuminated the lawn, and staff prepared for a sparkler send-off that would mark the couple's departure. Nadia Bloom, a 6-year-old elementary school student, had been chosen as the flower girl for her aunt's wedding. She wore a floor-length dress made of layered synthetic tulle, selected for its fullness and appearance under evening lighting. The fabric extended well past her ankles and flared outward as she moved, brushing against the ground as she walked. By nightfall, the reception had shifted toward its closing activities. The wedding party distributed 36-inch sparklers to approximately 40 guests, including several children, forming a loose circle along the garden path. The sparklers were considered routine, and no fire extinguishers or suppression tools had been positioned nearby. Venue staff did not provide safety instructions beyond advising guests to hold the sparklers away from their faces. As the newlyweds prepared to pass through the circle, guests raised the sparklers overhead. Nadia stood near the edge of the group, watching from several feet away. Wanting a clearer view, she stepped forward into the narrowing space between guests. The long layers of her dress shifted as she moved, trailing slightly behind her. As she turned, the outer edge of the tulle skirt brushed against the exposed wire of a lit sparkler held at waist height by an adult guest. The contact lasted only a moment, but the temperature of the sparkler, exceeding 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit, was enough to ignite the synthetic fibers instantly. The fabric flared and began melting at the same time, clinging to the lower portion of the dress. Flames traveled rapidly upward through the layered material, feeding on the volume of the skirt. Within seconds, fire surrounded Nadia's legs and lower torso. Several nearby guests hesitated, momentarily unsure of what they were seeing. The fire produced thick, acrid smoke as the synthetic fabric burned, and Nadia attempted to move backward, swatting at the flames with her hands. Adults rushed in and attempted to smother the fire using jackets and clothing pulled from their shoulders. The flames were eventually extinguished, but not before the melting material caused severe burns across her legs and torso. The heat and smoke also caused injury to her airway as she struggled to breathe. Emergency services were called immediately. Paramedics arrived approximately 12 minutes later and found Nadia conscious, but in critical condition. Burns covered roughly 40% of her body, including circumferential burns on both legs. Due to visible swelling and respiratory distress, she was intubated at the scene and airlifted to a regional burn center. Despite intensive treatment, Nadia's injuries were fatal. She died approximately 18 hours later from complications related to severe burns and inhalation injury. The fire marshal's investigation determined that the ignition occurred when the synthetic dress came into direct contact with an active sparkler. The report noted that natural fiber clothing is significantly less flammable and recommended restricting children's proximity to open flames during events. Following the incident, the venue implemented fire safety requirements for all flame-based activities. It was July 15, 2018, when a backyard wedding in rural Indiana would end in unspeakable tragedy on what should have been the happiest day of her life. Emily Vance, 26, had spent months planning every detail of her outdoor ceremony. A kindergarten teacher known for her creativity and warmth, She had chosen her grandmother's sprawling backyard property for its sentimental value and natural beauty. The location held countless childhood memories, and Emily wanted to share that special place with her future husband and their combined families. The wedding venue featured a large white rental tent erected to shelter guests from the summer sun. The installation crew had struggled with the uneven terrain and rocky soil, forcing them to drive the anchor stakes only partway into the ground. Several sidewall panels remained partially unzipped to allow airflow in the humid conditions, a decision Emily had approved to keep guests comfortable. After the ceremony concluded without incident, Emily moved freely throughout the reception space, greeting guests and posing for photographs. She had changed into a lighter reception gown that allowed easier movement for dancing. Her route took her repeatedly near the tent's eastern wall, where elderly relatives including her grandmother Mabel were seated in the shade. Weather conditions began shifting during the late afternoon reception. What had started as a calm day gave way to increasing wind gusts as a storm system approached. The tent fabric began to flutter and strain against its moorings, creating a rhythmic snapping sound that some guests noticed but dismissed as typical for outdoor events. The critical moment came when a strong gust, later estimated at approximately 35 miles per hour, caught the tent's western edge. The shallow stakes, already compromised by the rocky soil, began pulling free in sequence. The entire structure lifted on one side before collapsing inward. Emily had been standing near her grandmother's chair, leaning down to hear Mabel over the music, when the collapse occurred. Heavy aluminum support poles, each weighing roughly 40 pounds, fell with the cascading fabric. One pole struck Emily directly across her upper back and neck as she was bent forward. The weight, combined with layers of heavy tent fabric, pressed down, restricting her ability to breathe. The groom and other guests immediately began cutting through the tent fabric with kitchen knives and scissors. The process took several agonizing minutes as the heavy material had to be carefully lifted. The groom frantically coordinated the rescue effort, while his best man called emergency services. When rescuers finally reached Emily, she was unresponsive. Her grandmother, who had been directly beside her, was physically unharmed but in severe shock. Despite immediate CPR attempts by guests with medical training, Emily could not be revived. Emergency responders arrived within 20 minutes but confirmed she had already passed away. The county coroner's investigation determined that mechanical asphyxia due to external chest compression caused her death. The report noted that the anchoring system was insufficient for the soil conditions and wind loads. Cell phone videos provided investigators with clear documentation of the failure. The rental company faced wrongful death litigation and safety violations. New regulations were implemented requiring deeper stake installation, additional support systems, and mandatory weather monitoring protocols for outdoor event rentals in the county. The tragedy left her new husband a widower on his wedding day, and the family forever unable to separate their most joyous celebration from their most devastating loss. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.